Hey all, it is mid-June 2024, and I thought I'd do an update for you on this bacon avocado that I've had in ground here in the Phoenix, Arizona area just under 2 years. I planted this in August of 2022. It's a grafted plant. It was planted at a 3-gallon size. This can be a very challenging plant to grow in our climate. It does not like high alkalinity, salts in our soil that we have here in most soil profiles in the Phoenix metro. Avocados also like a more humid growing climate, which we lack here. We're often in single-digit humidity figures for the growing season. While it's not too common, there are people in our area that are successfully growing avocados, fruiting avocados. So 2 years later, it did bloom this past spring for the first time. It did set one fruit but dropped it. So this is actually a hybrid of 2 Mexican avocado varieties. It was originally cultivated in 1954 by a man named James Bacon in California. So it's not called bacon because of its flavor profile. It's based on who discovered it. On sizing, I decided to put this in the ground because this is a medium-sized avocado. This can get up to 15 feet wide and tall. What's nice about this variety also is that it's reported to be self-fertile. Even though this is a type B avocado, it doesn't require pollen from a type A in order to set fruit. Many have reported that it sets very productively on its own. So it's kind of nice that you don't have to graft on an A variety or have another one nearby. So I'm going to show you an image of what this looked like at planting in August. You can see it's definitely filled out nicely. It's getting very wide, more of a bushy type format, even though this variety is supposed to actually have more of an upright growth stature. This one is tending to spread out. So the trunk has lignified at this point. It's not just green bark, so that's good. As we come up though, these younger parts of the tree still have the green bark. So that's one thing to keep in mind. These are very sensitive to sunburn. So if you're gonna grow avocado, you absolutely need to keep these in afternoon shade. They will burn up when young. You need that microclimate. That's really the key to success, is having these in a good spot. And I'm going to show you the microclimate that this plant is in. It gets full afternoon shade from 11:30 on in this spot. While this is planted above ground, this container is not filled with soil. It's used to fill mulch in it. Because that's one thing I've really learned with avocado, is they love having a deep mulch around them. I've got a good 10 inches of bamboo mulch in here, as well as watermelon scraps. This is how I feed this tree. I let the bugs do the work. After my chickens are done with their afternoon watermelon, I put the scraps in here and let the bugs break it down and feed this tree naturally. That is how this is getting fertilized. On soil media, this was planted with native clay soil, about half of that, and the other half was sand and decomposed granite, as well as pumice, to create a lot of aeration. Very easy way to kill your avocado is when you plant it, putting in organics like compost, manure, wood chips, mulch. Any of that stuff does not go in the planting hole, because that will break down and lead to rot. And you will definitely rot this plant out in the summertime if you've got that kind of material decomposing in the roots when you're watering frequently, which you will need to do with this plant to keep it from going dry and having sun scorch. We've had 112-degree days, and you can see the leaves are fine. There's no issues here. I'm also not doing RO water or anything like that. This plant gets automated irrigation through this 1/4-inch line and this mini bubbler. The irrigation at this time of the year is running 4 times a day, a couple times in the morning and a couple times in the late afternoon. Just for around 4 minutes each session. It's giving the plant probably 4 gallons of water a day. That's all this needs. Light, frequent applications. Super important to note that I'm able to water like that with this plant because I have this in the right soil media. If I had planted this in organics like manure or compost or wood chips, actually put that stuff in the planting hole when I planted this, that kind of watering schedule would have led to rot. Avocados are fairly sensitive to root rot. You want great drainage, and you also don't want these organic materials breaking down and essentially turning into sewage from the watering. People love to blame water on why their plant rots out. That's not the problem. The problem is the soil that they're putting their plants into. And I have a video in my irrigation playlist from Gary Matsuoko that really goes into detail on what is perfect soil and why you need to use it. If you want any chance of growing this plant here in the desert, you really need to get your soil right for avocados. It needs to be inorganic and very well draining. I do have a few more avocados in another area of my yard. This is not within a natural microclimate, but an artificial one that I stood up for a lot of tropicals here. This is a frame that's made out of 1-inch conduit, and it's got high density shade cloth on the sides to help with that southern exposure, and then up on top, of course, to keep the sun from beating down on these plants and burning them. It's an 80% density shade cloth. So when I show you this plant, this is a day avocado. It's a type A that was planted in 2021. So this has actually been in the ground a year longer, but looks a lot smaller than the bacon avocado we just looked at. And that's because this was an example of a plant that I did not do the right thing up front. I planted it at grade, which was a big mistake. I also did not amend the soil with sand and pumice. I since dug this plant out of the ground in late fall last year and did plant it about 6 inches above grade, put some plastic edger around it, and then put mulch on the inside, similar to the bacon avocado we looked at. I did have to also chop this back heavily because this was exposed to a lot of sun last year. I did not have this properly shaded, and it developed severe burn to the point where the bark turned black and the branches died back. So just a lesson essentially for me to really cue me into the fact that these plants need to be heavily shaded. So highly suggest that if you're going to put these in a full sun location, like these are here, south exposure, to get that shade cloth up like this. When you hang the shade cloth, do not put it right around the plant. You want the plant to be able to breathe, so make sure that you've got at least 3 feet of gap between the shade cloth and your plant, or you could be trapping more heat again. So not a whole lot to report about this plant. This is kind of a rebuilding year for it. It's in the proper shade now. It's at the proper grade now, so we'll see what happens in time. This is supposed to be a precocious variety that can fruit in as little as 3 years. Have not gotten any fruit off of this plant yet. But another one I have going in the yard here This is a brand new plant. This I got just a couple months ago. This is a gem avocado. And I want to point this out because another way to go is to container grow your avocados. This is a dwarf variety that's not really going to get any bigger than 10 feet. So this is very conducive to growing in a container. And container growing is actually an easier way to go on avocados here because you can really control the variable a lot more than you can in the ground. So with this, I've got this planted in a third peat moss, a third sand, and a third perlite. And that gives it a really nice, good draining soil. Nice thing about peat moss is it holds onto moisture, but it also is able to release it as the plant needs it. So it doesn't get waterlogged, it can drain well, but retains moisture so that you're not constantly having to irrigate this. So with my container plants as a whole, I'm pretty much watering them just once in the morning to the point where the water, runs out the sides here. And I can kind of, tug up on it and feel that it's heavy, fully saturated. It's fine just with the once a day watering at this high heat time of the year. Gem is a nice variety out of California. It's another hybrid. Can deal with our cold temperatures. None of these avocados require cold protection, just the shade protection during the summer. So excited for that one. That's also supposed to be a very productive, precocious variety. Very young at this point. It was sold to me as a 3-gallon, but really was a 1-gallon root ball. As we know, a lot of these nurseries sometimes just recently up pot and then sell them, which isn't too nice because you're paying that price for the larger plant. But it happens. The last one to show you is another dwarf variety that is in a container. Okay, this is just in front of the gem in the same area. And this is a Wurtz, or little Avocado. It's one that I picked up from Lowe's, actually. And it has really grown very well in container culture. So I've had this just for a year now. Got it last spring. Even though it's in a container, definitely applying a deep layer of mulch on the inside of the pot. You can see the trunk has lignified on this one as well. This is another variety that you can definitely fruit in a pot. This is a good variety in that it has both the A and B types in it, so it's self-fertile, and the fruit's a decent size and quality. So I hope you found this video helpful if you're interested in growing avocados in the Arizona, Phoenix area or a similar climate. My goal is within 5 years to get fruit off these varieties. I think that's a practical goal. These varieties are not going to fruit, right away, especially if you're buying them at a 3-gallon size. I'm one of those that believes in getting a plant smaller and letting it acclimate as it grows rather than buying a huge plant, like a 15-gallon. Might get fruit a little faster with that setup, but especially when you're putting them in the ground, it can shock the plant more and take a while for it to get established and root into the ground. So I am taking it slow and steady with these, but I am seeing some good progress on them. Definitely they look like they're in good health. They're actively growing. A couple of them flowered, so they're already getting ready, practicing. Hoping to share a video of the fruit tasting with you in a year or two once these plants get to fruit-bearing size. If you have questions, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching and happy gardening.